Greg Mescall here with you for USA Water Polo at Home. We are super excited to kick off a full week devoted to looking back at the Sydney Olympic Games, 20 years since the 2000 Olympic Games in Sydney, and we are fortunate enough to be joined by three women who were all on the podium in Sydney. And we're joined by Olympic gold medalist from Australia, Liz Weeks, goalkeeper for the Aussies. Liz, thanks for being here. We're joined by Team USA's Brenda Villa, part of the silver medal squad from Australia. And then we're also joined by Sofia Konukh from Russia, part of the bronze medal effort, and also joining us here. And for those that don't know, these women all checking in from their home areas. So we've got Liz talking to us from Perth, Australia, Brenda from Northern California, Sofia from Khanty-Mansiysk, Russia. Appreciate all of you being here. Let's just dive right in. Before we get to the gameplay, we have to talk about what it meant for water polo to be included at the Olympics. Liz, I want to start with you. Australia played such a big role in lobbying to get water polo to be included. You came onto the scene in '95 as part of a very good Australian team. What was that lead up like to getting the games to be part of Sydney 2000?
Thank you for inviting me to join you today. It's really exciting, and I cannot believe it's 20 years. Yeah, I made the team in '95, but in '97, in being an athlete, a water polo athlete in Sydney, we were presented with a unique opportunity because the games were going to be in Sydney 3 years later. A lot of officials were coming into Sydney to check on the process of the game, so it gave us a unique opportunity to actually really fight to get our sport included in the games. And I organised a couple of protests. You know, just to get our story out there and to let our voices be heard. And it was pretty amazing because one of those protests where I gate crashed an IOC press conference was actually the IOC and FINA's turning point in making the decision to put women's water polo into the games, because they knew that this water polo noise and water polo problem wasn't going to go away. So couple of months towards the end of '97, when they announced that women's water polo would be in the Olympics, I was told that that final protest that I'd organised at that meeting was actually the turning point. So that for me was pretty, it was pretty amazing to be able to be part of that and to be able to have stood up for something I really truly believed in, and then to go on and compete in the first ever Olympics. Just such an honour. And just to know that now, even when everyone, all those women are competing in Olympics since then, to know that there's, you know, that I was involved in that process is just a really wonderful feeling, and such an honour to have been part of for all women, female water polo players all around the world.
Now, Brenda, I'll turn to you. You come up with Team USA in the late '90s as well, one of the younger players on that group, but you knew a lot of the women that thought maybe they'd never get a chance to play in the Olympic Games, and many careers did end before the Olympic Games came along. What was that moment like when it is made known that there will be an Olympics for women's water polo, whether or not you even know if you can make the roster, but what's the reaction for the United States team?
Well, I remember being on the national team and getting an email and just kind of getting that update. Not even an email. What would it have been? A phone call then? Who knows? But getting the news about this and just being super excited and thinking like, oh my God, now we have a chance. And I do recall the protests that like Liz was leading. And if, correct me if I'm wrong, but was there like some exposure in those protests to draw attention? I can't remember what happened 20 years ago, but whatever you did worked.
Yeah, there was some exposure. We were in our cozies at Sydney Airport, but in the meeting a couple of days later, we actually had our track suits on, so that was a bit more respectable.
Either way, it made a big difference. Sofia, you were a little bit like Brenda in that you were one of the younger players coming on board. What's the memory for the Russian team as they're preparing and knowing that now there is a possibility to become Olympians?
Well, hello. Thank you for inviting me. And I really want to thank Liz and everyone who actually put so much effort in it, and it made it possible for our sport to join the Olympic family, because for every athlete, Olympics is it's a big, not just system, but idea. And for me and for my teammates, when we found out that we are in the Olympic family, it's like you, bam, and you are feeling connected to those greatest universal ethic standards like friendship, like solidarity and fair play. Like, so you connected to something big and nice.
There's no doubt about it. And let's now think back on Sydney itself and the venue. And whenever these Olympics get brought up, the number 17,000 always comes to mind because of the amount of fans that were able to watch some water polo. Even now, that doesn't happen all that often. Liz, your memory of just that first game, walking into that venue and being in your home country and knowing that all the work you'd put in was going to pay off, regardless of how the outcome of the games went.
That first game, I remember it was just completely overwhelming because it was the first game ever for women's water polo at the Olympics. And I was overwhelmed and my body I was so nervous that my body felt like lead. And I just thought, oh my God, I'm not going to be able to jump out of the water. So that was completely overwhelming. And I thought I might even, pass out before we jumped in the water. I was just that overwhelmed. It was, nothing could really prepare you for that.
Brenda, you'd played in some big games leading up to that. Did it feel different? Did you have a sense, you're what, in your early 20s, late teens at that point? Do you get a sense of the history being made as you get ready for that first game?
I think for us and going through the qualification tournament and trying to, beat Italy to qualify, we got a sense of the importance and the magnitude that we were stepping into, and that prepared us a little bit, especially being like in hostile territory, like we ended up being in the final. But like Liz says, there was this feeling that you couldn't really prepare for, but you were so excited because you had the opportunity. So like once you hit the water and the whistle blew, then it was, we were ready to go. But I mean, it was, big moment.
We know the results, of course: Australia gold, USA silver, Russia bronze. Sofia, when you look at women's water polo history in the 80s and 90s and the results of who won World Cups, World Championships, you see a lot of Australia, Netherlands, Team USA. Russia not always in that conversation when you're talking about medals. What was the expectation for Team Russia going into Sydney? Was this a team that knew they would medal? What's your memory of that?
Well, I think to get to the games, I mean, the whole qualification process was so hard, and it was only 6 teams. So to get there, it's like felt like everyone has the same chance, and it was just like I'm very thankful for our coaches. They just did the perfect job, powerful and wise leadership. They brought us in the right moment, in the right shape, in the right time. Perfect.
The format of those Olympic Games, it's kind of like the Pan American Games now, if USA fans are familiar with that, where you essentially play every single day in a row, not like the current Olympic Games where you get that buffer day, or the World Championships with a buffer day. Sofia, let's keep it with you. You obviously went on to play in a bunch of different tournaments. Was it a challenge to play high-level game day after day in front of the world?
Well, let's say it was just another reality for me, because we never played the Olympics. We just like the girls said, it's like you never nothing like you experienced before, and you just get in the flow, and like every great athletes know what it means. Like you just get in the flow and you do it, and
Brenda, was there a moment early on where you felt like you belonged? You're on this big stage for the first time, and Liz, everyone's talking about the nerves and just, trying not to pass out to make sure that you compete. Was it game 1, game 2? When did you feel like you and your teammates settled in and just started playing water polo?
I would say game 1. I mean, if my memory doesn't fail me, we opened up with the Dutch team. They were incredible in the 90s. Our track record versus them in the 90s wasn't all that great. So to be able to open up the tournament and get that win really set the tone for us. And I think it just externalized what we were feeling internally, that we belonged and we could do this. So it was a great opening day for us.
Liz, you fight so hard to get the Olympic Games to include women's water polo. You're campaigning, you get your spot. Let's talk about making the team. You know, and everyone here had to make their roster. Just take us back to that moment, and what was the process to make sure that you had battled to include the sport? What was the battle like to make sure you actually got to play?
I think 90% of our players sort of knew that they were going to be in the team. I think we'd been together for a while, and that was really just sort of the last position or so that was sort of up in the air. And of course, you never really know until you know. However, we sort of knew, but yeah, when we were told, it was like, it was pretty cool. I think we were given a letter or something under our doors. We were in camp at the time. But for me personally, it was just trying to stay injury free. I was one of the older, I was the third oldest in our team. So at that time, I was in the physio virtually every second day at least, just to stay in the water. So I was just trying to look after my body so that it survived until the games.
Liz, for the Australia team, was there any sort of pressure to make sure that you performed well? It's the games in your home country. You'd obviously fought to have this sport included. Did you and the rest of the team put any extra pressure on yourselves? You know, now we really have to perform here.
I think maybe we did as a team. I mean, you do that personally anyway. You put so much pressure on yourself. And as a team, we were going in ranked second, but we were going in there to win. And so we put that pressure on ourselves. I think, yes, maybe because of we were also vocal in trying to get the sport into the games, and then it was a home games, and then, you know, we talked the talk and now we had to walk the walk. But we were just going to take that opportunity and run with it. And it was just so exciting and such an honor. And we were the lucky ones that got to go, unlike, you know, many teammates that had come before us and all the women that had come before us. So I think, yes, there was that pressure, but also we had that hometown advantage. And I think that, yeah, there's pressure, but at the same time, they're lifting you up. And I really feel that does give you, being in your hometown, it does give you an advantage.
Brenda, your old coach, Guy Baker, tells a great story about being at practice and a phone call comes in and he does not want to be bothered with his phone call because he's in the middle of practice, but it's the call that's letting everyone know that rosters are going to go from 11 athletes to 13. And so 2 more teammates are going to make that team. Just your memory of that moment and the challenge it was to make the U.S. team for 2000.
We were in good old LaSalle, right, at training, and I definitely remember having for that announcement, and it was big time because, I mean, you have a few younger players trying to make this team. You have older players that have put their life on hold for so long, and it makes a huge difference to go from 13 to 11. No, from 11, now it's 13 to, from 11 to 13. And it was, for me, it was just another opportunity, another spot to be able to like continue to train for and make my dream still something that I can reach for.
And then to find out, you know, Liz talked about receiving a letter. What was there a big announcement? How were you told you were going to be part of this first U.S. Olympic team?
Greg, they kind of all blend in together. I know that might sound a little, you know, snobby. It was
diva status here when you made 4 of them, you forget. Yeah.
Right, Sophia, right? It kind of blend together. No. I mean, with Guy, we'd always have one-on-one meetings, and you'd go in there and you'd talk to the coaching staff, and they kind of would let you know. So it was always one of those, like, when's your meeting? And that's when you're going to find out. So it's one of those where you're like dreading that walk into the meeting, but you want to get in there so quickly because you want to know either way. And one thing Guy's always said is, like, I could only guarantee you tears, right? So it's at the end of a tournament or at the beginning, there's tears because you're either going to be on the team or you're not. You've invested so much. So tears are really the only way to show that.
Sophia, tell us about this Russian team. Was this a veteran group like Australia? Was it very difficult to make that final 13? What is your memory?
Well, we actually had a very short season at that year. Like, and in January, we already started like training all together and like in scrimmages, going like common training, like to the Netherlands, Canada, US. So it wasn't that big, such a big group, but it kind of like you already guessed like before that, like Brenda said, that meeting, what's going on, and but you still don't know, and that anticipation. Yeah, when you finally know that you are in, and it's crazy. It's your dream comes true, and I don't know. It's amazing.
You were talking about earlier joining us on this call from Khanty-Mansisk. You're from near the Ural Mountains. Russia is such a large country. What did it mean to represent your area, to be from your town, and to be one of the 13 selected?
Yeah, from our area, it was 4 girls, and yeah, it's very important. And what I wanted to say about getting into Olympics as a sport, it's particularly in Russia, it gave a big push because first it like geographically spreads the sport in the country, and inside one area, it gives the Olympic sports. It gives the possibility for the athletic schools to start the program of water polo, and so like more kids get involved, and it's like a circle, more coverage, more funding, and then more results, and like, you know, so yeah, it was a great push.
Yeah, definitely helps to grow the sport. Let's talk about the competition itself, the actual gameplay in Sydney. Brenda, you talked about coming out early against the Dutch. I know Team USA had a draw early against Canada. Australia had a loss early in group play as well. Liz, your memories of just the lead up, getting to that gold medal match. Did you feel like everything was hitting on all cylinders? What are your memories of the way the team was playing?
The team was playing fine. I don't believe everyone was firing all together during the week, but I mean, that's the beauty of a team, isn't it? You know, someone has a really great game and carries the team that day. And I felt like it was that during the week. Personally, I don't believe I had a great week until the semi-final against Russia and then the final. I was really struggling with the pressure and the intensity. So I was actually worried I wasn't going to get played in the semi. I was just because I hadn't had an awesome week. Thankfully, I managed to turn things around. So no, I don't. We were playing well, but I believed we had more in us. And then, you know, we were beating Russia on our final. I mean, that was a close game. That was a tough game. We nearly didn't win that one. So it was really anyone's tournament. And yeah, I just think the pressure was overwhelming. And thankfully, we got it together in the final. But even that was quite a slow game. It was quite an unusual game, I thought, that game. It didn't seem like a normal game.
Yeah, lots of low-scoring water polo in the medal rounds in Sydney. Both the gold medal and bronze medal game ended 4-3 scores, which is not unheard of, but to your point, certainly a slower game. When you get through that semifinal against Sofia and Russia, is there any sense of relief? You know, in team sports, right, once you win the semi, you know, okay, we have a medal of some kind. Does that take the pressure off?
Yes, absolutely. And that was actually my 29th birthday that day. So that was a pretty nice birthday present. But absolutely, we knew that we had a medal of some sort. But then waking up the following morning for the final, I just had the best feeling ever. I felt like I was walking a foot above the ground, and I just knew we were going to win that night. It was a really unusual feeling. And even when Brenda scored on me with about a minute to go, I think it was 3-2, and then Brenda scored and it was 3-3. Even then I thought, that's okay, we'll win in extra time. It was just really weird. I've never felt that way before, and I just really, it was quite unusual.
Now, Brenda, Team USA gets to the final, and if you ask today's water polo fan, I think they think about the U.S. being in the final as a given, just how well they've played. But that 2000 team was not favored to medal. That was a team that was kind of surprising people to get all the way to the gold medal final. So what was the semifinal like? And then as you get into that final, is there a little disbelief that you're even in this position? How are you handling these major moments?
Well, I mean, their semifinal once again was against the Dutch team, a very strong team. So here you are trying to beat the same team, a team that is ranked one in the world. And, you know, we had our game plan, we stuck to it, and we ended up victorious. And I think, like Liz was saying, I think after that game, we were on cloud nine. And it was kind of like, we could do this. We're here. We believe, like no one else believed we could be here. And you ride that feeling up until the final. And even when, with that timeout, for us, you know, for that 6-on-5 to go up 3 or to tie 3-3, like we believed, and we're like, we'll get into overtime. We can do it in overtime. And then that didn't happen. But I feel like from the beginning, and we had that tie to Canada, but then we bounced back in the semi. Like we truly believed that we could be at the top of that podium. And like Liz said earlier, like it could have been anybody's tournament. And it was such a hard tournament because we played every day. You played everyone. No one could hide. So it's different now.
Sofia, as Liz talked about, it's Australia, Russia in the semifinal. The Aussies move on. Brenda's gone through the bronze medal scenario as well. Sofia, how challenging was it to get everyone regrouped and then try and go out and win the bronze?
Yeah, that's always the hardest task after the lost semifinals, to get yourself together and like go and focus and do it. But you know, all those months of preparation, when we did like hours and hours of swimming, video, tactics, gym, and all that stuff, there was like some unspoken, I don't know, like something in the air between us that every single tear, every single drop of sweat, it will pay off. And even in that bronze medal game, even when we were losing 2 goals, like it was still in us. And I think that like mental strength, that what actually made the difference.
And Sofia scored 2 goals in that bronze medal game as part of a 4-3 win for Russia.
Yes, I remember.
Thank you, Liz.
I'm so glad you two are not shooting against me anymore.
Thank you, Liz.
Liz Weeks, the goalie here from Team Australia, had to deal with 2 of the best in the game, in Brenda and Sofia. Let's talk about this gold medal game. We've been putting it off long enough. 20 years has gone by. Look, this was to put it mildly, a talked about final in the world of water polo. If you haven't seen it, YouTube the end of it, but there is a last second goal for Australia. Liz, you're on the other end watching this unfold. Your memory of that, and then, you know, knowing that you're now the Olympic champions.
There was a lot of confusion there. And I think we had scored a few seconds before that, and that goal was disallowed. So there was a whole heap of confusion and movement. And then, you know, 1.3 seconds left on the clock. Simone Hankin does this beautiful pass to Yvette Higgins, our number 2 lefty. And that shot she did from, I don't know, she was way out past the 7-meter line, I think. It just went through 2 hands and the goalie's hand. And I can't actually believe it happened. Sometimes I sort of have to pinch myself that it actually really did, because it's such a fairy tale ending. I mean, you couldn't write a better ending, could you? Here I was thinking, it's okay, we'll go into extra time and then we'll win there. And then what do you know, a second left on the clock and we've won. It was just, it's too hard to describe in words. And in front of that home crowd, yeah, I still to this day don't have words to describe it.
And then Brenda, you're on the other end of this, and you have this great goal, right, to draw level. And then there's just confusion and bedlam after the fact. Obviously the USA, right, thinking that this should have gone to extra time, or what's the immediate reaction there as you try and process what's going on as the clock expires?
There's this great shot of me, like, I think cursing or something, like when you see, you go back and watch the video, and it's more just like, what is going on, or what it, you know, use your imagination. But that's what it was. It's like, it was confusion. Like, it's not like, did it count, did it not? It was just like, what is going on? Can someone explain it? Right. And I think that would have sat better with us, but because I feel like it took days to really understand what happened, it just seemed like unfinished business. But I will say that being in that crowd, which I don't think there has been a women's water polo game that's been that highly attended. Like now when I think back 20 years and I'm just like, what a magical place, what a magical moment. Even with most of the crowd cheering against us, it was still so magical that you kind of, now I kind of forget that I was so confused at the end, and you're just grateful to be in that tournament in that big moment.
You bring up such a good point, and this happens so often, especially with silver medals in team sports, because right as we talked about, out of the podium teams, that's the only one where you have to lose at the end, right? Gold and bronze get to win going away and have that feeling. And Brenda, you've talked about it. Almost every silver medalist kind of gains this perspective over time, right? It's very raw and bitter in the moment, but a year later, 5 years later, here we are, 20 years later. What's the big thing you take away from that silver medal?
Well, it's interesting you say that, because it's like the silver and you have this feeling of being in that press conference. And I still remember to this day, like, not being able to answer questions. I feel like Guy answered all the questions for us because we were still processing. And I think media and spectators and people forget that it's happening in real time, and you have to like downshift so quickly and be like, oh, this is great. But I think the moment you step back on the podium with your teammates, you kind of like shake hands and like hug each other and look left and right, and you know that your journey was amazing with them. So you try and put it past you, and it's easier said than done. But I do remember like squeezing each other's hands on the podium, being like, you know, we did something amazing. But I mean, yeah, it's hard. No one's ever going to tell you that they were happy if you play on a team sport. Like, in that moment, it takes a little bit. Give us 24 hours and then we'll tell you how happy we are to be in that moment. But then you think the next 4 years, a bronze medal. So it's like, you know, where, and the semifinal loss, and like, I don't know, it all hurts. It all.
Sofia, 20 years later, what is the bronze medal ended up meaning to you?
Well, at that point, it was just an emotions like joy, pride, and I don't know, feeling of complete task. And when we came back home, of course, we started realizing, now I know how much actually worth for the development of the sport to get the Olympic medal. Not talking about like each of us, and it's still probably for me the most important medal, just because not. Like, I think it was, like Brenda said, some magic, special teams, special moments, first ever.
Sofia, you had a long water polo career. You play at USC, multiple more events with Team Russia. How much did the Sydney Olympics kind of provide the foundation for what you'd go on to do in water polo?
You mean the Sydney? Of course, it was. Well, it wasn't the start of the career. Like by the time I already had like some medals on world and European scale, but it was kind of like awakening moment when you see that you can actually do so much more than you think of yourself, because like there is so much inside of you, and you just have to give it up. Of course, with the help of coaches and teammates.
Brenda, you've talked a bit about obviously what it's meant now 20 years later, but if you think about just being part of history, you know, being one of the few women to kind of get a chance to be a part of this very first event, you're still heavily involved in the game, advocating for its growth and all of that. How important was it to you to be a part of that very first thing 20 years ago?
Well, I've always thought of myself as a bridge between generations. And I think, like, especially in the US, like Title IX and everything that came after Sydney. So it was really an honor to be a part of that first ever, because it is important to pass it on to the next generation. Like, this wasn't always here. We've got to be grateful. There's still more to like fight for, and just to make sure that we put it in perspective always. And I mean, there's always room to grow. I feel like our sport can continue to grow. So I know that at least for the US, there's been so much success, but it's like, okay, what's bigger than the sport? What else can we do? How can we keep passing this forward? Because like I'm grateful for Liz and all her protests that she did to get us into the games, right? So then now it's like, how do we keep passing this torch on where women are supporting women so that we continue to have that many more opportunities, and not just in sports.
Liz, 20 years later, and this is probably a tough one to answer, but you were part of a gold medal effort, the first in women's Olympic water polo, but you were also a huge part of the effort to actually include the sport in the Olympics, which will last hopefully for a very long time. Does one mean more than the other? Which one's closer to your heart as you think back on it 20 years ago?
Actually, definitely the fight to get the sport into the games, because that was the turning point in my life. That changed my life, and I feel that was bigger than just me, though. That was that was the turning point where obviously women were put into the game. So I believe, yes, it's awesome winning the gold medal. I mean, you feel completely satisfied and relieved. But I think, like Brenda said, just to be there and be part of that first ever Olympics was really special. And whether it was gold, silver, or bronze, just what it meant for women in sport, I think it's bigger than that moment. It's the future as well for women. So definitely, 97 was probably the turning point, and probably means more.
And Liz, as far as you can tell in Australia, what did the Olympic Games in 2000 do for water polo in general, and do for girls and women playing water polo in the last 20 years?
It definitely helped the sport. I mean, Australia's been quite successful since then. No other golds yet, but hopefully we'll change that next year. The sport did grow for quite a few years. However, now I think we're fighting for media coverage with a lot of, in Australia, there's Aussie rules football that women are now playing, which is fantastic that the women are playing. But we're still fighting for coverage, and we're fighting for funding, and it's still a hard slog. But it's not just the women that are fighting for that as well. It's the men and the sport of water polo. So it definitely helped and lifted our profile soon after 2000, but it's probably regressed a little since then.
Brenda, same question for you. And obviously we know it well here in the U.S., but you talked about the convergence of the Olympics and Title IX, and that was really boom times for women's water polo at the collegiate level. And there's been some more growth in recent years. What have you seen when you think back to? You're a great example. You played high school water polo with boys. Now there's girls high school water polo throughout California. What have you seen in the last 20 years as far as the growth of the game?
I think in the U.S. I've seen steady growth. I was hoping for a boom. If you think of the '96 Olympics for the U.S. and you think of women's basketball, women's softball, women's volleyball, they all, I think, most debuted in the '96 Olympics, and soccer, right? Their numbers don't compare to water polo, but I don't want to take away the growth that we've had. But I do think there's still way more to go. I think we need more women's coaches, more women referees. And again, not to take away from the growth, but I want to see more. And like we said, that's one of the reasons why I keep continuing to be involved in the sport, because if little girls see us still involved, hopefully they'll continue to want to be part of the sport. And I mean, we've all had great careers and so many life lessons through water polo. So just, we can always grow.
Sofia, same thing for you. How did these Olympic Games and that bronze medal impact the growth for water polo, especially for girls and women in Russia?
Well, as I said, like every girl and every woman who played water polo, at the moment when we joined the Olympic team, I think they got higher self-esteem and belonging to this great idea of stuff. And for Russia, it was a boost. And for example, in one area, just because of the medal, local government started building a pool, and like the athletic schools started opening the programs. And I think, yeah, it was great. In fact, it's very hard to overestimate it, and the number of the girls playing and raised enormously.
We're streaming live here on YouTube. We got a question that came in. Someone wants to know, where do each of you keep your medal from the Sydney Olympic Games? Sophia, I'll start with you. Where's your bronze medal these days?
Well, first it was at home, and now I put it in a bag, so it's like in a box, safe.
Excellent. Brenda?
I actually loaned my medal out to the International Swimming Hall of Fame. I was inducted maybe 2 years ago, and they're like, will you loan a medal? And I go, well, let me loan you the Sydney one, because historically, you know, it's the first one ever, first silver medal for women's water polo. So they have it for now, but usually they're in a sock drawer.
Excellent. And Liz?
Yeah, mine's just in a cupboard.
Just next to the cereal and the breakfast. And
yeah, not far from it. Moves around a bit, and sometimes I have a panic attack when someone asks to see it, and I'm like, oh, where is it? Which cupboard have I put it in?
Oh, that's classic. Well, this has been a fantastic chat. I really appreciate all three of you taking some time to kind of stroll down memory lane. You know, as we wrap up here, I just want to kind of get one more final thought from everybody, and you know, we'll start back with Liz here. You know, when someone talks to you and says, "Oh, hey, wait, you were the goalie, right, in Sydney? You were that, you know, part of that team." As you reflect back, and I don't know how often you get a chance to think back on the Sydney Games, but what comes to mind, and what's the lasting memory for you?
Camaraderie with your teammates, and just seeing as a group of women and a team what you can achieve. I think that's probably the thing I miss the most, being part of something really special.
Sophia, to you, similar, you know, when someone maybe meets you at work or sees you around and says, "Hey, I looked you up on the internet, actually. You were awesome at water polo and won a bronze medal in Sydney." What comes to mind?
Well, first of all, that yes, we were the pioneer, and there's always some warm feeling in my heart, like, because I always start remembering all my teammates, because many of them finished right after the Olympics, and through entire my career, I kept in mind them, and like, I don't know, I taught younger generations how they played, and I don't know, it's like very warm feeling for me, like every time everyone asks.
Brenda, when someone finds one of the old photos of you in the Speedo cap and the suit playing in Sydney 2000, and you get a chance to kind of reminisce, where does this moment live in your mind and in your heart?
I mean, it's up there with the top moment, because it was the first ever, and like, when I was born in this like women's sports, I've been able to be a part of a lot of firsts. So it was kind of kicking off a lot of the firsts that happened after. So I'm forever grateful to have been a part of that, in that magical moment that I hope many other girls after us get to feel.
That's fantastic. Well, copyright laws prohibit us from playing the Australian national anthem here to finish things out, but this is the podium from Sydney 2000. Liz Weeks, goalkeeper for Team Australia, gold medalist. Brenda Villa, Team USA, silver medalist. Sofia Konukh, bronze medalist for Russia. Thank you so much. Appreciate all you've done for the sport, and appreciate you taking the time to join us here this evening.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye. It's been wonderful.